The Sixth Amendment reads in part, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. The Bragg, quote, case did not so do. And here is Sarah Westwood of the Washington Examiner to discuss that. She is the chief investigative and political reporter. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I saw your 7 takeaways from the indictment. I read it. Those 7 takeaways are all applicable. They're all correct. But the Grand Canyon-sized hole in the indictment is it does not specify the felony that bootstraps the misdemeanors back into felony status and over the statute of limitation. Have you found anyone from the left, right, or center that defends this charging document as solid and reliable?
No, virtually no one, even people who have been openly partisan about Donald Trump and really excited about the fact that he is facing criminal charges. Nobody's expressed a lot of confidence in this indictment. And you're right, that's the biggest problem with the indictment is that Bragg's whole argument rests on proving that Trump committed a crime that he didn't even have enough evidence to include in the indictment and doesn't even really have the ability to articulate to reporters. So to the extent that there were legal analysts on the left out there who were sort of still holding out hope that this could be strong, their argument sort of rested on this idea that Bragg has more to the case that he just hasn't brought out yet. He must have more evidence. We just don't know it yet. He's, keeping it close to the vest for now. But like you mentioned, that's not really how indictments are supposed to work.
No, it's completely unconstitutional. And I do not know why Tacopina said yesterday, look for something in July. The motion to dismiss in July. As Andrew McCarthy told me yesterday, they should be under the judge's toes today, meaning yesterday, Wednesday, because the indictment was Tuesday. They've had a chance to read and assess it. They should have moved to dismiss yesterday. Sarah, Jim Jordan is one of the people you cover, chairman of House Judiciary. Does he want to bring Alvin Bragg in?
He's threatened a whole bunch of things. Yeah, the House GOP, the House Judiciary Committee definitely wants to talk to, if not Bragg, then the general counsel for the Manhattan DA's office. And there's also been talk about, looking at the Department of Justice's budget and other ways that the House Republicans could apply pressure to sort of retaliate for what is pretty clearly a partisan attempt to undercut a presidential candidate. Whether that's working the way that potentially Democrats may have wanted is a different story. But I think there's a lot of the punditry and like the mainstream media have been questioning the propriety of what House Republicans are doing in response to Alvin Bragg, but you haven't seen a lot of honesty or sort of candor about how nakedly partisan the DA's actions are, really only just condemnation of the reaction to him.
And I am a little bit unsurprised, but also always dismayed that they do not seem to have a coordinated approach, they being Republicans in charge of committees. You see Chairman Comer, you see Chairman Jordan, you see a bunch of other Republican talking heads. They all should be saying one thing: what's the charge? But to focus and execute, I gather that's beyond the Republican conference to organize, because Kevin McCarthy was rightly meeting with the president of Taiwan yesterday.
I think in terms of some of those, especially those higher profile investigative committees, I think sometimes there's a little bit of a competitive spirit among the chairmen, who can have the splashiest investigation. So they're not always coordinating in the way that maybe they ought to if they wanted to maximize their impact. I do think you have seen a remarkable amount of unity, at least in terms of the messaging from Republicans around this, right? There's really no more Liz Cheney's left in the House Republicans who are taking the side of the Democrats on this. Pretty much all Republicans, even the moderate ones, are really openly critical of what Bragg is doing. So that is a victory for Republicans who have had a really hard time singing from the same sheet over the past few years. But tactically, there's not as much focus.
Still disarray. This should all be in the Judiciary Committee with Jim Jordan. This is not really Comer's brief. It is the weaponization of the government brief of that special subcommittee. Sarah, let me go over to Democrats for a moment. Will anyone talk to you about the Bragg case? On the record.
Democrats are really, really reluctant to talk about it. even ones who really celebrated his legal jeopardy in the past. So I think there's a recognition that this is a really weak case. It's not what they hoped for. All of the rhetoric leading up to the arraignment on Tuesday and when the indictment came out from Democrats and pundits was just sort of dismissing this idea that all Bragg had was the hush money charges. Well, surely he has more. It's 34 counts. It must be a more substantive case than that. And when that turned out not to be true, and that was really the only thing they were holding on to sort of suggest that this was a legitimate investigation, now they really have nothing to say when how weak the case was.
All right, so I got a question for you from your congressional reporter chops. Whenever something embarrassing happens to Republicans, the media descends on the halls of Rayburn and Longworth, and they follow Republicans around, asking them to comment on what they obviously don't want to comment on. Where are the reporters following around Democrats, asking them to comment on what they obviously don't want to comment on? Now, the House is in recess, the Senate is in recess. That might be the reason, but you would still go follow them around if you were a reporter and something bad had happened to Republicans. Here, the bad news is for Democrats, and they're not on the record.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the House and the Senate are out does complicate the ability to get sort of off the cuff quotes. But I think the other reason too. I don't think that reporters are particularly interested in exposing just how embarrassing this is for the Democrats who've cheered this on. It's not really maybe in their ideological interest to press that point.